Stephanie Badour has long been studying how to assess the workload distribution within research teams. She previously worked at BC Children's Hospital until 2017, where she moved across the country to work at Montreal Children's Hospital, where she's now the clinical research unit manager. Stephanie will be discussing the use of an easy-to-use tool developed with her peers using EDGE data for objectively assessing and measuring staff workload. This will hopefully lead to an even better balance that considers the experience and patient load of the team members. The title of her talk is Balancing the Scales, a collaborative tool for workload analysis and FTE assignment, full-time equivalent assignment.
Yeah. Yes.
You have the floor.
All right, thank you. Just checking volume, everybody can hear me. Okay. I hope you are able to use this talk and hopefully use these the skills that I'm and the data that I'm talking about here for your own sites, because this is a very important initiative that it's not just me, I just happen to be the one speaking on it. However, there's a ton of people who have been a part throughout since the beginning of my career, even working on the Opal scoring system to, coming up with a specific project that's kind of ebbed and flowed throughout the years for analyzing workload for clinical trial sites. And it is super important so that people understand the complexity of trials increasing and the amount of staff that you need to actually have a quality department that your CRAs aren't going to have burnout all the time. And I can say in my career, I've always been it's very difficult to get in a proactive phase. You're always in these reactive phases because the work is so complex and nobody understands. And you're always getting complaints from the doctors that they don't know what you're doing. So anyway, we needed to objectively have a way of assessing this. And so these are some people who have been working on the project. I want to give a shout out to Intella Zaffino, who reignited this sort of spark to get this going again. She's moved on to a different role outside of pediatric oncology, but hopefully she is actually watching and can give some input during the question and answer period. We are also working with obviously 3CTN and C17, who are pediatric oncology sort of regulators partners. So there's lots of people giving input, and I would welcome input from anyone else after this presentation. So we have monthly working group meetings that were paused for a little bit, and I apologize, I was on sick leave getting surgery, so we're going to go start those back up. And then Rebecca and James have been helping us with the EDGE data and formulas for the data analysis. There's an easy to do Opal scoring system now integrated into EDGE, where we can access that data and use it for all of the sites, not just our own site. So no one's reinventing the wheel on the Opal score for the studies. And we initially have done one sweep of doing the Opal scores that I actually did myself, but we need other people to verify that they're accurate and make sure that everyone is sort of in agreement on what the Opal score is. This can be done outside of EDGE, 100%, but EDGE gives us sort of an advantage where there's collective data in the system at a study level that everyone can use, and you don't have to input it uniquely for your site. At first, it is time consuming to do this, but I think once you get everything set up in the system, it's well worth the time spent on doing that. The reports for the analysis are generated within EDGE, and then the data is copied into a customized spreadsheet where we have graphs that are automatically generated, and you can tell sort of by looking a quick glance where you're at with your workload distribution. This EDGE just changed to EDGE 3, as you guys know. And so there's new, what used to be entities is now called forms. So it's like a data form where you can enter certain data into the system. And what we do is enter, this is an example of what it looks like to do a project forms report that we would then use to plug into our sort of algorithm to generate that workload in the system. And then we also use the report for the participant current status. So are they being pre-screened? Are they being approached? How many are being consented, screened, recruited, so on and so forth, because we all know the workload is weighted differently on where those subjects are within that sort of process and status within the trial. And just to give you guys a little refresher on the OPAL scoring system, it was developed in Ontario, actually, and it's the most published scoring system available for clinical research workload. And that's why we chose to use it for this. We're, again, pending the validation of the scores that are into the EDGE system right now. And those are going to be done centrally by C17 eventually as well, so that the sites can all use the score together and have access to that data for their reports. I don't know if this looks familiar to anybody, but essentially what you have is at the top is a very simple study with like one time point. So say a biology study where they come in, they give a sample, and you have to enter data at one time point and that's done. Then it gets more complex. And so scores go up to the bottom tier is phase 1 trials. So we know that phase 1 trials are very difficult to do and have a lot of complexities and a lot more quality assurance and monitoring and things like that. So, so the scale goes from 1 to 8. And then you have what they call add-ons. So for protocol mandated inpatients, so if those patients are coming in and having to stay on the ward to get their treatments, that adds 0.5 weight. On-site monitoring, we all know how much of a time-consuming activity that is, especially for industry studies. The number and duration of treatment follow-up in our world in pediatrics, it's at least 5 to 10 years. So you're going to have those follow-up numbers piling up over those years and adding more workload to your team. And then if it's an industry sponsor, CRO, there's added workload. And then if there's multiple surveys, questionnaires, things like that, they're extra on top of things because they like to add all of those things into the trials now. So that's all there. Won't get into this just for time, but part of the scoring system has you look at core processes versus special processes, and within those, between numbers like 5 and 7, maybe 4 and 7, you count whether or not there's multiple core processes and multiple special processes, or is there multiple core processes and one special process. So it's within the scoring system, this is taken into account. It accounts for all the study activities. However, I'll just go through this really quickly. I just want to say that for the purpose of my presentation and what I've done so far, I am specifically looking at the tasks that are patient, sort of patient facing and recruiting patients and following the patients on studies. So any patient coordinating task is what I'm using the scoring system for. The scoring system does take into account the other tasks like reg and regulatory, but at this point, when I was doing the analysis, it worked best for me to just isolate the amount of time that people are spending on patient coordination. So there's a few things, here's a list of things that need to be completed within the EDGE system and accurate. I think that's one of the main things. It needs to be accurate, especially the site study status, the patient status, and those numbers need to be really accurate for this to work properly. What's sort of new in this system is that we are taking into account the experience level of coordinators coming on and weighting that within the system of like what range of points of complexity in these trials should a coordinator have. So for example, target workload for an experience level new person coming in would be 50. And actually I'll start at a sort of the other range, which is in the publications, they were saying that a score for one CRA of 200, a full-time CRA, is like way above what they should have. So that person is going to be overwhelmed, burn tipped. So we don't want to get anywhere near that. So what I chose, and this is just at this point, it's kind of arbitrary, but I chose the way to do it as the most experienced staff should have a score of aiming at 120 with a plus or minus of 30 points. So that's for the most experienced staff. You know, once you're getting anywhere over that 150 where you're getting in danger zone of like that person burning out and moving on. Yeah, and so that's sort of the the target workload total, and that's where we're going to compare the calculations to and the ranges to with the actual analysis. So taking into account a few different things here, the patient status and where they are, you can see there's an adjustment weight based on the patient status. And again, I've sort of put these out as customizable because it's how I feel they're weighted. And again, we're working together in a working group, so up for discussion whether or not we want to change the weights. But pre-screening has an adjustment factor of 0.1 and so on and so forth. You can see that obviously the bigger tasks like screening, randomization, enrollment on treatment are going to be the biggest amounts of work. And so that's going to tell you like, when that coordinator has like 5 patients on study in treatment, they might be overwhelmed. And so it'll show within your stats, depending on where those patients are. The other thing is, so I've used the percentage of the sort of full-time equivalent that they're working on the patient coordination tasks only. So for example, if I have somebody who has a mix of REB and patient coordination, I'm only taking, like if they do 2 days a week of patient coordination, I'm taking that and I'm putting 0.4 as the adjustment factor for that person. Hopefully that makes sense. And then there's also the ability to customize weights based on the roles that you pick in the EDGE system for the person on that study. It's a very similar sort of thing to the percent FTE concept where maybe a data coordinator isn't going to, like the work that the data coordinator is doing on the studies is a lot less than what someone else is doing, and that's why you would weight it differently. So the total workload for one staff member is the complexity score. So from 1 to 8 plus or minus, I believe it was 4 for the add-ons, times the role adjustment factor divided by the number of staff assigned to the study. So this is another thing, is that sometimes you have more than one staff assigned to studies that accrue a lot of patients. So that is taken into account in the calculation. The number of patients and the patient status adjustment factor, and you get a total OPAL score for that CRA for the study. Then when you want to analyze everything, you put that all together and you sum up the scores of whatever studies that person is assigned to, and you have a total OPAL score between 0 to 200, basically, is what you're looking at. This is probably, I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is the actual spreadsheet. When we input all the data, we sort of basically plop the data in. We go to EDGE, do the report, and the report comes out in Excel or CSV file. We open up a tab. Actually, the tab will be made already, and just cut and paste the data into here. It takes 5 minutes max. And so essentially, you just pull that data whenever you want, and you can update this whenever you want in real time. Now, you have to make sure the data is accurate. And when I first did this, I noticed that a lot of our older studies with follow-up patients, they hadn't been moved to the status of follow-up. And so just to be, as managers, you want to have a look and just make sure that the numbers make sense, because you will get skewed results otherwise. And you can see here, you can see the studies on the project, and then the OPAL score, and then the blue part is where the names of my staff are blanked out. But then you can see key staff. So you can see that there's sometimes, a couple people assigned to a study, there might be more. And you can also filter here, because sometimes on my key staff, I do have the PI and the pharmacist. So I take them out when I'm doing the evaluation as well. And then we've got columns for the adjustment factors, and the number of staff is auto-calculated. And then, of course, all the different sort of calculations within is this giant formula that's lovely for me as a data lover. So it's very fun to watch the calculation go. Oops, that's back front. Here we go. This is an example of where I could see that there were discrepancies within the data. And I know that for the study on top here, ACCRN07, I know that these patients are not in pre-screening phase, they're in follow-up phase. And I just know that because I know all the studies, right? So you just want to make sure that your data is accurate before you go on doing this. So once that total score is calculated, I was speaking about, a visual to see like, okay, who's over, who's not over, how do I do this? I just want to be able to quickly see like, do I have to like rearrange things? So have a little table like this that pops up and it automatically will say whether or not someone's over their targeted workload or under or within. And so this is when I first ran the report on my staff. And I had felt like this was the case, but it actually was confirmed by doing the analysis, which is nice. So then I went back in and I reassigned workload. And obviously before that, just make sure the data is nice and complete and check for that. But once I reassigned the workload, I reassigned things based on, usually it's the number of follow-up patients that we have to follow that we can kind of like first shift so that if there's an active patient coordination going on, you wouldn't necessarily want that coordinator to then retrain on a whole new study and coordinating that whole thing, whereas follow-up data is an easy thing to kind of reassign. So you kind of want to reassign those things first and try and keep it within the disease groups if you can. It's not always possible. In peds, we have mostly leukemia, lymphoma patients, and it's like way more than all of the other disease groups. So you end up having to have your clinical trial coordinators learn all of the different disease groups and report that survival data within the systems. And what you end up with is a graph that'll show you those red lines are showing the range that they should fall in. The green is the target. So depending on the experience level of the person and depending on the weighting system, what their target should be. Again, the range, and then the blue is what their actual score is. So now we've got everybody in a nice range here. I can recheck this as often as I want. And now it takes me about 15 to 30 minutes, maybe max, to have a look at this and adjust it accordingly. We're still sort of integrating this within my staff, so it's still kind of like a work in progress. And the working group is still going on. We're trying to sort of rearrange things and get everybody's feedback on how we can best make this. But it's nice to have something in real time to be able to say objectively, we might need more people, or we maybe are overstaffed. I don't know if that's ever happened in the history of any clinical trials program, but anyway. So next steps are to validate the OPAL scores. So we need volunteer sites, and it's going to have to be within our pediatric group because they're pediatric studies. These guys know the studies really well as well. So it's a small world. We're also going to do pilot site collection. So if anybody wants to become a site to try this out, you can do that. That's absolutely encouraged. I think that it's really important to get site feedback on this as well. And it can be a really huge tool, I think, in management of clinical trials going forward. I also, some of the literature included the use of a workforce, like a work satisfaction survey that was validated so that we can also track the satisfaction of the workers. One of the biggest things about turnaround is like they're not happy because they have too much work to do and it's just so much stress. So we really want to make sure it's actually making sense. Personalization and the ability to kind of like make things unique within the system and scoring per your site is something as well that we're looking at. And then BCCA has been doing their own analysis over the years. So we want to partner with them and see what we can do to kind of either integrate the way that we're doing things, or perhaps, well, who knows where it could go. I have lots of ideas and fun things for the future. I really want to work on those non-patient coordination related tasks and looking at where the study, weighting things by study status. So, studies in startup or maintenance or follow-up, and weighting the scores against those. And then also, I did make a priority scoring system when I was at BC Children's Hospital a long time ago. And so it's to prioritize study openings. And we all know we have lots of opportunities to open studies, but we do not have enough staff. And so to prioritize all the study openings in an objective way, that's another way, another part that we could integrate into the system. Lots of other things too. Use of AI would be nice. And then visualization in real time, like James has with the dashboards for 3CTN. Things like that in the future could be very useful. Okay.
Thank you.